Hello friends and welcome back to Stay Tonight. In today's video, we will cover a very important topic as far as ReactJS is concerned. Yes, we will be talking about context API, or you can say we will be covering use context hook. So the idea is, as your ReactJS application grows in size, you know that if you have to change anything in the user interface, you have to deal with states. And you also know that if you have to pass on some data from component to component, you have to pass that using props, right? We have covered all those things. If you're following this series, I think you should be very well versed with all these things, right? But as I said, as the application size grows, sending data from one component to another component using props become very tricky, tedious, and it can also lead to confusions when someone else is seeing your code or working on your code, because the readability of the code reduces as the size of the application grows. Number of props that are being sent from component to component increases. So a good way to handle that is using a context, right? So we create a context. A context is like a storage, or you can say a box in which we can store number of variables, state variables, functions, etc. And then we can provide the same context, that is the bundle in which everything is enclosed, multiple state variables and the functions to deal with them. And we can provide that package to each of the components that we want. So we can have a context provider which will provide that context to every component that we want. And in each of those contexts, how we can use that is using the useContext hook. So don't get confused right now. I'm just giving you an overview. We will cover everything in this video. So in this particular video, what I want to do is I want to use the old routing technique in which we will be using route component, browser router, etc. like we did in the video before the last video. In the last video, I covered the latest updates in the React Router DOM version 6.4, in which you can use object style, and there are so many different things added. But go back another video, I think it was the 20th episode, where we created a simple ecom type layout in which I had product categories. I shared with you guys how you can use params in URL. So I'll be working on the same application, the same code, and I'll be adding more to that so that I can show you guys how you can use context, right? So let's get started. Now, just to give you an example, why we need a context, I've already described, but let me give you a good example so that you can understand it easily. So let's say we have an app component. Okay, and inside this app component we have some state, let's say state 1, right? Obviously there will be a method as well for this state 1, and then we have another component, let's say C1, and to pass this state variables that are defined in the main app component, we will obviously provide props, and this can be passed on to C1. Now let's say C1 internally has another component C2 which it uses while creating the user interface, or while creating the UI using the JSX. It has another component inside of it. Now to pass on the same props from C1 to C2, again C1 has to pass on the props to C2. Similarly, let's say there's another level, there's C3. Again the props have to be passed. Now imagine that let's say the state 1, which is a state variable defined inside of app, is used in the C1, but it is not used in C2, but it is used in C3. So even though it is not used in C2, still C1 has to pass it to the second component so that the second component can internally pass it to the third component. So this is where the confusion starts to pick up, right? This is called prop drilling as well, because unnecessarily you have to pass on some properties so deep down in your application component hierarchy that even if some of the component are not using it, still you have to pass those props to those that particular component so that it can pass on to its child component. So it's more like parent, child and grandchild relationship, where you have 3 layers or more than 3 layers of components. Then prop drilling happens, because unnecessarily you have to pass on props onto different lower levels of the component. A better way is to, in this app component, if I create a context and I provide that, okay, this context should be provided to all C1, C2, C3, then all this props sending can be removed, and easily inside of every component which context is being provided to, you can easily access the context. You can easily access whatever is stored inside of the context. So it makes handling the context or handling the state variables super easy, passing them on to different components. And like I said, as the application size grows, it is very convenient to use a context rather than sending in props to each and every component. So without any delay, let's start. So as you can see on the screen, I already have this small application that I created in the last video or last to last video. So it has a basic ecom type layout, home page, then we have different category pages in the products, computer, desk, gadgets, t-shirts, etc. And we have another sorting mechanism where we can choose the price from high to low or low to high, and the same thing gets added to the URL as well. So we have used routing for this, and this is working fine. Now what we want to do over here is we want to add a profile section, and in that profile section we'll have some information that will be displayed over here, which will be username. And in the profile you can also edit the profile, so that if you want to change the username, you can update the username. So we'll just go with one user information, which is the username. We will define the username in the main application.js, which is the main root component, and from there we'll pass it on to the profile. From profile we will pass it on to edit profile, and we'll use everything like I mentioned earlier, sending in the props to all the components. First we will see what the problem is, and then we will come to the solution, which is the context. Okay, so let's get started. So let's quickly create the profile part. What I will do is, in this app.js I will quickly define a state. Let's set a state. We will name it username, and we'll have a function for this, username state variable, and we will use the useState hook. Let's for now define a default value. In this case, let's say Abhishek is the username. Okay, now what I want to do is, over here just adjacent to the logo is on the left side, I want to show the username over here, and when the user clicks on that username, they will be redirected to profile, like generally it happens in all the application. So what I'll do is, I'll use the username, I will use the username state variable over here, and I have added styling for this, so they are automatically appearing on the extreme end. So I've used flex property with space between CSS, so that the components, this span and this span, automatically takes the opposite ends of the available width. Okay, so what I have to do next is I have to create a link around this. So I will create a link around this span. I don't even need a span, although let's just keep the span, doesn't matter. Why is it giving me an issue? Okay, so here it got closed. Okay, and the URL where we will redirect the user will be profile. So right now we don't have a router defined for profile, but we'll do that. Okay, it is appearing just like this. So let me just change the style for this a little. Let me add a class over here, btn purple. I've added simple styling, and all through this series of ReactJS you must have seen that I'm using the constant CSS that I've added, some basic styling of buttons, etc. So it's a bit on the larger side. The button is appearing very large, but it's fine for now. Let's just keep it like this. Okay, and now what we have to do is we have to also define a route. The route will be for the profile page, and it will load the profile component. So we don't have a profile component right now, we will create that. So let's quickly do that. In the pages section, as you can see, I already have home and products. Like I said, I created this in the last and the second last video, where I talked about how you can use params in the URL while using React routing, right? So let's quickly create another component over here, and we will name it profile.js. Inside of this, I will create a functional exported component, and yeah, it's done. Okay, so we have to import it as well in the app.js. Let's quickly do that too. Profile, done. Now it should appear. If I go to profile, I'm getting profile over here. So this basic routing is working for us. Cool. Now let's just add some styling to this profile page quickly. I'll pick up the home styling only. I don't want to do additional styling stuff. All right, so welcome. Now I want to show the username over here, right? Right now I'm just saying welcome user, let's say, but I will send in the properties and I will show the name of the user over here. So it says welcome user. Now we want to show over here welcome Abhishek, and we will give the user an edit profile option as well, where they can change the username, update the username. So we will create another component, edit profile, and we will use that inside the profile component. So let's first complete this one. So in order to send the value for the username, which is defined in the app component, I will have to send props to this profile, right? How I can do that? over here in the routing, I'm defining the element as profile. So while I'm defining the component as profile, I'll just provide the username as a prop as well, right? So what I'll do is username is equal to, and I'll directly provide the username state variable inside the profile.js. I will handle the properties and use it like this. Okay, so that's done. We are getting the username over here. Let's just change this to a heading. Right, welcome Abhishek. And then we do, so this is done. Now, like I said, I want to have an additional edit profile section over here. So I'll have a button that will show or hide the edit profile component, and in the edit profile component, which will be displayed over here, I will have a simple form, nothing fancy, just a simple form with a one input field and a button where the user can provide the username and update, and that will update the username, or the state variable username, and that should be reflected site wide, right? So for that, we will have to pass on the information for the username and how you update the state variable, which is using the set username method that we created while defining the state variable to edit profile, so that edit profile component can use this particular method to update the state variable, and it can get reflected over the site wide, the application wide, right? So how do we do that, right? If it can be a little tricky, but just imagine it like this, that you have a profile page inside which you want to have a profile editing section as well, and we are just moving that section, the form for editing profile, into a different component. In that component, because I have to update the username and I want to display that as soon as the username is updated, I want to display that immediately on my website as well, on my application as well. So I will have to update this state variable, and to update this state variable, I have to use this set username method, right? So I will have to pass this state variable username to profile and edit profile, and I will have to pass the set username method function as well, so that I can update the username, right? So what we will do is, let's just make the code changes. So in the profile.js, what I'll do is I'll create a button. Let's say the button, and let's say edit profile, looks fine. And over here, so let's just have a, so this edit profile button will either hide or display the edit profile component, so we have to associate a state with this, right? And we have to have an event handler as well for this, so that we can change, we can toggle the edit profile component, show it and hide it. So let's quickly create a state over here, and this is standard. If you have to do any time in any application you want to implement this toggle, show, hide something, you can simply have a flag in state and you can use it to do that. So this particular code that I will be writing now, you can use it anywhere you want. So let's create a state, let's say toggle edit profile form. Too large a name, but it's fine. Set toggle this is equal to use state, and by default I'll give it false as the value. And over here on click, what will I do is I can either define the function here only, but it can be confusing for you guys, so let me just define it separately so that it becomes more clear. Show, or let's say toggle edit profile. Okay, so I'll name the function toggle edit profile. I'll create a function over here, and inside of this, inside it, what I'll do is I will set the toggle edit form state variable to its opposite. Whatever it is, I'll just convert it into its opposite and I will save it. Okay, and over here what I'll do is I will, based on this particular flag, I will use the then operator and operator, and I will show edit profile. Now I've talked about this in the previous videos as well, so this is more like a then operator where it checks whether this condition or this variable returns true. If yes, it will display or it will execute this part. If it doesn't, it will just skip this part. Okay, so it's more like having an if else condition only. So this is done. Now we do need an edit profile component as well. So let's create another page over here, which will be edit profile.js. Again, let's just create the component, a basic component, and import it over here. Import edit profile from edit profile. Oh, I named it incorrectly. Let me just rename it. Edit profile. Okay, I'll have to use it over here as well. Now if you want to do this editing, you can simply, I have mentioned this earlier as well, you can use F2 and you can directly update the name and it will get updated everywhere. Okay, so that's done in this. Let's save it and let's see if this is working for us. Yes, so as you can see, as I'm clicking, it is showing it and then hiding it. So this part is working for us very well. Now inside the edit profile component, all we have to do is create a form to update the username. Okay, and yeah, so let's do that. Let's quickly create a form. Let's not waste time. I know you guys can easily do this, but because I'm creating this video, I have to do it, right? So what I'll do is create a div. Inside of this, I will have a simple input type text, and let's provide a placeholder, provide username, and yeah, that's it. And we have a button, update. Okay, let's see how it looks. Okay, it looks like this. Let's provide some CSS to this button. btn pink. Cool. So it is looking like this. Edit profile. As soon as I click on edit profile, I get this. As I click on edit profile again, it gets hidden. Okay, so this is perfectly fine. Now I have to have the code so that this particular form can be used to update the state variable, which is my username. How do I do that? Now in order to do that, inside the edit profile, I need two information, not just two information, at least one information I need. I need the function that can be used to update the state variable, which is the set username method, right? And in order to send this, or in order to provide this to edit profile, because edit profile is being called inside of the profile, so I will have to send this set username function to profile first, and then from profile I'll have to send it to edit profile, right? So how do I send it to profile? I again add over here another prop value, which is set username, and I provide the set username method name over here. So okay, so set username is being sent to profile. Even though profile is not using it, still we will have to get it till profile so that we can send it to edit profile. So we will send that to edit profile now. Props dot username. So in props, you simply get an object like structure where you can use any value that is stored inside the props using the dot operator. So we received this inside props. We received two values, an object with two keys. One is username and another is set username, and we can use them, access them using the dot operator. Simple, right? So now the first confusion has already been created. In the app.js, if someone else is seeing your code, they'll be like, okay, in the profile, you have sent username and set username, so profile must be using the set username, although that is not the case, right? So code is not that readable. In profile, then the user will see, or anyone who's reading your code will see, okay, the guy has not used the set username method, but still they are sending it. Now the total code line in this particular is less. It's just 18 lines of code. Someone can easily figure out that, okay, the set username method is being sent to edit profile. But imagine it has hundreds of lines of code. Then it will be very difficult to figure out what you did with the props.set username function, right? So it becomes unnecessarily untidy, less readable, right? First problem. So now we have sent it to edit profile as well. Now let's use this in edit profile. Let's receive the props over here. Here we'll have to do a couple of things, some standard stuff in order to handle the form that we have created for edit profile, right? So we will create a state, let's say new username, and I'll create a setter function for this, set new username. I will use state over here again with empty value. Now as the user clicks on this input field, on change of it, I can have the username, the new username updated with the value whatever the user is typing in this input field. So let's say update new, or let's say store new username, and over here I will have to receive the event const okay, and this store new username I'll call over here. Now to access the value that a user is providing in the input field, how you do that? You add a event handler. It can be on change, on blur, on key up, anything that you want to associate the event handling with. I'm using on change, so as the user will click or enter value, on change will be triggered, the event will be fired. I can access this particular input field using event.target. Let val is equal to event.target will give me the access to this particular input field, and dot value will give me the value. Okay, so now I have the value over here. What I'll do is I'll set it into the new username state variable that I have created, and on click of this button I want to update the main username. So as the user is typing in the value in the input field for the new username, I'm storing the value, and as the user will click on the button for updation, I will pick this new username value and store it into the main username state that we have, which is this one. Okay, we have already sent this setter function to the edit profile using props, so we will use that. Okay, so let's create another function, update username. We will call this when this button is clicked. I have already covered how you can handle forms in a better way, so you can also have a proper form tag over here and handle all these things very easily using a submit button click, but that's your choice, you know, however you want to do it. I'm just showing different ways of doing it, right? So in this particular function, what I'll do is I'll simply use the props.set username function, because we are getting that from over here. This is the name, and inside this I will store the new username. Yep, I think now the edit profile part is done. So what we have done is input on the input field we have stored new username. New username is a state variable inside edit profile. As the user provides input, we store it in the state variable. When the user clicks on the button to update, we use this value and store it to the main username state variable. So let's see if this is working for us or not. Click on edit profile, provide a new username, let's say abhi7007, update, yes. So as you can see, this got updated over here and over here as well. If I go anywhere in the application, my username is now updated. So that is what we wanted to do. And if I want to change it again, let's say Abhishek101, it is working perfectly fine for me, and the username got updated. Now doing this, I think you must have realized the problem, right? From app.js, and this was just a basic application with 3 components. In the app.js, we had this state variable which we wanted to be available to a certain number of components, and we have to send it to unnecessarily to every component. So there can be multiple components over here. You will have to send it to each component wherever you want to use this username, and from there you have to pass it on to their children. Like from profile, we have to send it to edit profile unnecessarily. Now how you can do this in a better way, and that's using context. So let's see how we can have a basic context implemented now that we have understood the problem. I know I took some time to explain the problem, but if you don't understand the problem, what's the point of understanding the solution directly? So without wasting any more time, let's jump to the solution. So what I'll do is I will create a context. First of all, we have to create a context. It's more like a map in which you can store key values. So we will create a context inside the app.js, or we will create a context separately, right? And we will use that inside the app.js. Here we will store value inside of it, which is username and set username. And we will also add the mechanism of providing the context to our component, which is the root component or whatever component you want to provide it to. And inside those components, we will simply use the useContext hook to access the values. So let's quickly do all that. So let me start by creating a let's say app context.js file. Let's say inside this I will import create context from React, and I will simply create a context which will be exported. Let's say const app context. I will use create context and I will say export default app context, and this is done. So we are simply creating the context in this separate file. So if you're wondering why I created a separate file for app context, that's just because I wanted to keep it separately. There can be multiple contexts. So this is an application wide context because I have a small application. I just want to create one context in which I'll store everything and provide it from the root component to every component. Now you might have several sections in your application where you want to create different contexts for each of those sections. There can be multiple root, right? There can be one main root application or one main root component in which you have multiple sections and they have their own hierarchies. So you can create multiple contexts for each of those, first level of children component. Then they can provide those they can provide that context to each of their, grandchildren, etc. So you can create as many contexts as your application requires to have a proper structure for your application. That's why I created a separate file so that I can showcase that. Now what I'll do is I will use this inside my app.js. How I'll do that? I will simply import this app context from app context, right? So now I have my app context over here and I have to provide this context. So I've already created this context over here in the app context, so I don't have to create it again. In the app.js, I will use it and I will provide it. I will set a value to this and I will provide it to different components that I have. So inside this roots, I will have my app context.provider. So we use this and let's just close it over here. Okay. So I can have this at the root level also, just outside browser router also. But because then, it can be confusing. So for these routes, I'm providing this app context, these components, home, product, and edit profile and profile. So I just, added over this over here, right? To set a value to this, we use this, inside which we provide an object. In that object, you can provide anything. So what I'll do is I'll provide the username and the set username function. So this username state variable and the set username state updation function, I'm setting it into my context, right? And I'm providing this context to 3 routes, 3 components, home, products, and profile. Now because I'm providing it to profile, automatically it will be given to the edit profile, the child components of this profile as well. Now this part is done. So what we did was, for starting to use context, we created a context using the create context method, right? Simply empty context we have created and we exported it. You can also create it inside your app.js if you want, but I would suggest keep it in a separate file. Then in your app.js or wherever you want to provide that context, you want to fill the context and provide it to the children components, have access it over there and use the provider. So this app.js is now my context provider. It is providing the context to each of the child components. Now how we can use this context which has a value set in it inside the different components. So let's move to the profile JS and see how we can use it over here. Like I said, we will be using the useContext hook. So I've imported the useContext hook. Now to access this, so I will create a context variable over here, use the useContext method, and I will provide the name of the context that I want to use. So I want to use app context. Like I said, your application can have multiple components. Your application can have multiple contexts. So in whichever component you want to use any particular context, you can use it using the useContext function and provide the name of the context that you want to use. So now I want to use this app context. Now let's just quickly log the value that we are getting in this context and see what we are getting. And then obviously, we'll be easily using it because we are done almost. Oops, we are getting an error. Why we are getting an error? What happened to the application? Route component, children routes must be route or react.fragment. Okay, so over here there's one mistake that I did. I think we have to use it outside the routes. Yes, so we will have to use it over here to provide it to each of the routes, because routes expect route as the children, not app context dot provider. I think this should fix it. Sorry for, yep, refresh. Yeah, now it's working fine. Now let's go to this Abhishek so that we can open the profile component, and we're seeing over here username Abhishek and set username, which is a function that we're getting. So this is the context that we logged, remember? So this is working fine. So now what we have done is we have created the context. From the app.js, we have set a value, which is an object which has username and set username stored in it in the context, and we have provided the context to multiple components in the home, in the products, and in the profile component. So, and in the profile component, to use the context, we have used the useContext hook, and we have provided the name of the context, and we're done. See how simple it is. Now in this context variable, I have the username. So why do I need props? I can simply do this, right? And because I don't need the props, I can remove it from here. I can also remove all this from here, and the code looks much cleaner. We just have used directly profile, and we don't need the props. And over here also we can use this, although we don't want this as well, right? So in the edit profile also, we don't want to do this. We will simply use the context in the edit profile as well, just like we have used over here. So let's quickly copy this, go into edit profile, import, not edit profile, import the context part. So import the useContext hook and have this from there, from profile.js. Let's bring this part as well. So it will also have access to the context, and we can simply remove props from here. And yep, so from props we will not get the set username function. Now we will get it from the context, because app.js is providing us the context in which all this is set. The set username and the username is set. Now also our application should be working fine. Let's go edit profile. Let's say Abhi 7007, update, and as you can see, it is working fine. So that's how you use context. Now, let's just do a quick revision. Initially what we created was we had multiple levels of component. We had app, inside of app we had profile, inside of profile we had edit profile, and prop drilling was happening because unnecessarily we were sending props to lower levels, to deeper levels, which was not even required, right? And it just leads to a poor readability of the code and confusion. So we removed that. Now we have clean JSX code. We are just calling profile component over here. In the profile we are just calling edit profile, and everything that you have to pass on from component to component, starting from the root, we are setting it to the context. We have created a new context inside the app context.js. In the app.js, we are accessing the context, setting a value to it, and providing the context to multiple routes. And inside those components, we can simply use the useContext hook to access the context, which will have an object value for us. And we can simply access those values using the dot operator, right? So it's super easy. Now, in case, just an additional point, if you want to, let's say you say that I don't want to provide this context to home or products. I just want to provide the context to profile and the related edit profile or edit username or other, associated components with profile. So you can do that also. Let's just take this out from here and go inside the elements where we are providing the element for this particular route, and you can have this app context provider over here as well, and I think it should work. So now what I have done is inside the root where I have provided the element, I've used my app context provider there, so that I just want to provide my app context to a single component and its children components. So it should work fine now as well. Let's see. Edit profile, let's say Abhishek 8888, update, and it got updated. Every other component will have the updated value. Yep, so it is working fine for us again. So this is also something that you can do. Now, in the last video, I talked about how you can implement routing using the latest version or using the object style with different styles like outlet component we used and router provider we used, which make routing more decoupled. So similarly, this app context can also be integrated with the updated version of React router. So we will use that So in the next video, we will talk about that. It will be a quick video. This one is a long video, sorry for that. But in the next video, we'll see how this app context, which is a default feature of React, can be used with React Router DOM's new features. So we have a use outlet context hook that is incorporated in React Router DOM, which can be used using the outlet component that I talked about in the last video. Please, if you haven't checked the last video, do check it out. I've covered a couple of new features that are added in React Router DOM, which are very important. And all this goes away, this route, browser router, everything goes away, and it is very scalable. So it's a very, I think if someone is building a new application now and it's a huge application, they will obviously be going with the new updates that React Router DOM has introduced. So you should definitely check that out. For this part, how you can use context with those updations, with those new features of React Router DOM, we will talk about that in the next video. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you have watched up until now, special thanks to you, because you have seen everything that I've covered. And it takes time, it takes hard work to bring in those examples and talk about the problem, then the solution, and explain everything to you guys. So it's I'm very thankful when you post comments. So whenever I receive comment, it's very motivation booster for me. So please post a comment if you like this video. If you have seen this video till the end, drop in a like, drop in a comment. Let me know if you have any confusion, if I can cover anything else. Your suggestions are always welcome. Subscribe to the channel, press the bell icon, and share it with your friends so that they can also learn React.js. See you in the next video. Thank you so much.